I will present the result of my master thesis about Ignatius of Antioch's letter to the Romans, a philological comparison. Let's begin with introducing Ignatius and his letters. Ignatius was a 2nd century bishop of Antioch, and as an early Christian writer, modern scholarship also counts him among the apostolic fathers. After being sentenced to death, Ignatius traveled from Antioch to Rome, where he found his death in the Colosseum. During his travel, he wrote 7 letters to several early Christian communities, including the Roman one. And the letter to the Romans differs from the other letters since Ignatius reflects upon his death. Ignatius wanted to be devoured by wild beasts to become a martyr and to prove his devotion to Christ and to Christianity. So actually as an imitatio Christi. Secondly, it's the only letter embedded in the Passio Ignatii, given its content to his martyrdom. Furthermore, it's the sole known letter that is translated into Slavonic. Next to the Greek and Slavonic versions, there are also many other translations in other languages such as Coptic, Armenian, Georgian, and so on. Now, Ignatius' influence and popularity in early Christianity and beyond made his letters very susceptible to rewritings and new additions. So, in the case of the letter to the Romans, 3 versions has been preserved and transmitted. So the short recension only known in Syriac, and then the middle and long recension. So 9 manuscripts transmit the Passio in Greek, and 17 manuscripts dated or datable between the 14th and 16th century preserve the Slavonic version of Ignatius Passio and are known in South and East Slavic redactions. So among the Greek manuscripts, I focus on the Taurinenses, the Turin manuscripts, because unlike other Greek manuscripts, it shows a remarkable textual closeness to the Slavonic manuscripts, especially the witnesses, the earliest South Slavonic witnesses involving the Atus Hilandaricus and the Vinovanensis, so the Hilander and Vienna manuscript. So, questions to be addressed are what is the paleographical context of this Greek Taurinensis, and what is the relationship between the Taurinensis, the Slavonic translation as witnessed in Hilander and Vienna, and the Old Latin translation. For the last question, I first transcribed the 3 manuscripts diplomatically, and applying a text critical methodology, I compared them in a document with interlinear collation, as you see on the image. This consisted of the editions of Fundicamp, Greek long recension, the Latin long recension and middle recension, the Greek middle recension and English translation, and the apparatuses of Billmeyer, and then my transcriptions. The hypothesis was already made by Sells that the Slavonic translation and the Taurinensis belong to a common ancestor, and I work further on these hypotheses. So let's begin with the Greek Taurinensis. The Greek Turin manuscript is a defective and damaged witness, as you can see on the image, written on parchment with Greek minuscule letters. Erard dates it between the end of the 9th and the beginning of the 10th century, but unfortunately, many secondary sources took over the incorrect date of the 13th century, very late. And this is rather unlikely because it is, as you see, an early pure minuscule script without majuscule interpolations, which we expect in imitations of the scripts dating to the 13th century. The Passio Ignatii and the letter to the Romans was part of a collection, a hagiographic homiletic collection of texts spanning over most of the Orthodox Church year, beginning with the month of December, since Ignatius' sainthood was celebrated at the 20th of December. So here we see the Ghilander manuscript is a paper codex with Rashka spelling, dated to the early 14th century and consisting of selected saints' lives and homilies from the month September to March, including December. The Vienna manuscript is also a paper codex with Rashka spelling, dated to the late 14th century, and it incorporates a menologium with selected saints' life for the month of December. Then we switch to the next question about the relationship. And we will start with the Taurinenses. So the consensus has been has been made that the middle recension is seen as authentic, so made by Ignatius himself, and the long recension is a 4th century forgery. That's how previous scholarship categorized the different versions on the basis of authenticity, but this way of approaching does not take the multiplicity of traditions into account, which we clearly see in the Taurinenses and the Slavonic translations. So the text of the letter to the Romans in the Taurinenses is mainly based on the middle recension, but it also incorporates some characteristic expansions and textual variants related to the long recension, concerning additions, word order, omissions, and changes of word form. So in this respect, it is remarkable that the Taurinenses often select biblical quotations from the long recension, which can be, according to me, related to the medieval functionality of the text, because the letter and the hagiographical account are aligned to each other, and therefore special attention was paid to biblical references to give this version of the text of Ignatius' afterlife more authority. So in the example, we see that Ignatius exhorts the Roman community that if they keep silent, he will belong to God, while if they do not keep silent, he will be running, trechon. The word trechon refers to the passage of the first letter of the Corinthians, in which Paul tells about a running competition, in which only one athlete can win the prize, and the apostle sees the contest as an exercise in self-control, with the sole difference being athletes without having a true goal, striving to obtain the transient, while Christians pursue the imperishable. So if Ignatius would continue running, he would stay as an athlete on the earth, and he would not be able to accomplish his mission to achieve immortality and to belong to God. So that's the first. Another observation is that the Taurinenses has many textual variants, so variant readings, compared to the other Greek tradition, which we see in the following example. The edition transmits, of the general edition transmits pismonis, so the persuasion, but we see in the Taurinenses plismonis, satiety, which has another textual nuance. And if we then go to the Slavonic translation, we see that it also translates the intermingled nature of the Taurinenses. Almost always, in 4 cases, we cannot deduce something from the Greek model text, and we also see that in the first line of the preface, the Slavonic manuscript renders the long recension instead of the Taurinenses. So, as concerning the variant readings, the variant readings of the Taurinenses are also almost preserved in the Slavonic translation, as witnessed in Hylander and Vienna. But it is remarkable that the last paragraph, so the postscript, does not follow the Taurinenses in 3 cases. So we see the first example, the Taurinenses transmit only emoi krokos, and the Slavonic translation transmit actually emoi sympolois kai alois krokos. And then in the same line, we also see pathethon, which is a variant reading of pothethon. So it means that the name of krokos is actually subject to suffering instead of subject to desire. Throughout the text, a pattern became clear, and the Hylander manuscript, being a copy, tends to follow the original Slavonic translation very closely, as we see it in the first lines. The text of the Vienna manuscript, also being a copy, shows a tendency to focus more on the reader and its readership. This later copy sometimes adapts phrases to an easier reading, laying more emphasis on the context and textual interpretation. The first example shows that the translation of Erestite in Hylander has more the nuance of desire, while this meaning actually is weakened in the Vienna manuscript with Kostete. The same innovation we see in Vienna, in the Vienna manuscript, about the ruling of the world. So ton basileven, ton peraton is, which is very literally translated in the Hylander, but more freely translated to rule the entire world in the Vienna manuscript. Mm-hmm. Then we also see a very close connection to the Old Latin translation. And this connection was already noticed by Fungdiekamp and Bielmeier, so they made an edition of it. And they said that the wordings and word order of the Taurinensis, the Greek manuscript, could be paralleled with the Latin translation, and this is very precious for the Greek Constitutio Textus, so for making an edition. And this Latin recension is believed to reflect an ancient state of the Greek text due to its word-for-word translation, which we see in the following examples. And it is this Old Latin translation is also known as an Anglo-Latin version, or the middle recension of the letter to the Romans, and it is probably translated in the 13th century. So here we see that the Taurinensis does not render in a short time, so not a syndoma or synomos, but opts for etima, ready. So Ignatius does not pray that the wild beast would act quickly on with him, but he rather wants to, them to found ready for him. So the reading of the Taurinensis, the second line, therefore stresses more the willingness of the animals to devour him. And the other reading, so the reading of the edition, creates a stylistic parallel with synomos on the next line, and rather stresses this time span. So it is a small difference in nuance. And the reading of etima, as we see, seems to be translated also in the Old Latin text. So we have this example of the accordances, and that makes it also worth looking at the textual fragments that are not transmitted or clearly readable in the Taurinensis. An example of this we see in paragraph 2, The Hylander manuscript has a faithful representation of the Latin middle recension, so the Old Latin version. They have both the verb in future time, future tense, and they clear, it also has the Latin negation, neque aliquando, and the Slavonic one, which has 3 negations, emphasizing and reinforcing the strong negation in the Greek exemplar, which is a possible hypothesis. And the last example shows that in the fourth paragraph, the relationship between the Slavonic translation in the copies of Hylander and Vienna and the Old Latin translation is even more clear than in the Taurinensis, because the Taurinensis omits the reference to God. There is no Theou or something like that. In the final clause, beginning with Hina and ending with Evreto, whereas the Slavonic translation, indicated in orange, has these references to God, and also the Latin translation in the first line also has this reference to God. This could be an individual, this missing reference in the Taurinensis could be an individual variant, which is not reflected in the entire branch. So let's come to the conclusion. The observation on the date makes the Taurinensis a very early witness of the letter to the Romans, so end of the 9th, beginning of the 10th century. And the philological section showed that the division in recensions does not make sense, because the Slavonic translation only renders, and the Taurinensis manuscript only render a text combining fragments of the middle and long recension. So indeed, multiple traditions and recensions have influenced each other throughout this textual transmission history. And it is also illustrated that the close relationship with the Old Latin translation and the Slavonic translation as transmitted and preserved by the Hylander and Vienna manuscripts. So in most cases where a variant reading of the Taurinensis is significant, the Slavonic translation also renders these textual variants, even though in some instances it displays a corruption or omission or misinterpretation. So in conclusion, the comparison between the Taurinensis, the Greek manuscript, the Old Latin translation, and the Slavonic translation in the witnesses of the Hylander and Vienna manuscript confirms the hypothesis that these share actually a common ancestor, as we see in the tree. The Slavonic translation and the Taurinensis have sufficiently distinctive and also binding readings in common against the rest of the studied tradition, and this implies a common origin. And the particularities, as like the missing reference to God, or as we see here, the things indicated in blue or in white, indicates broader points to a sibling relationship than to a parent-descendant relationship. So finally, the accordance between the Slavonic translation and the Old Latin translation not only can give an insight into the part of the Passio Ignatii, into the letter of the Romans in relationship with the Taurinensis, but also when these parts are missing in the Greek manuscripts. As we have seen, the Slavonic translation, Taurinensis, and Old Latin recension have this go back to this common ancestor. So this was my presentation. Thank you for your attention.